Peter St Onge is here to talk about economics, while I also may pass out from a yellow jacket sting, so he may also become the host of the show. It's only a matter of time till we figure out which he's going to be, a guest or a host. Peter, you are an economist at the Herald. Give people a different perspective, I think, than the mainstream media. This is an article from CNN Business. 2023 was the best year for the labor market since the 1950s. And for some reason, this title of our video today is that the press is covering for economic doom. So who's telling the truth? I got that title from you. Is it you or CNN? It sounds really good when you read CNN.
I know it. Going on about 50 years now, the mainstream media has been carrying water for the government. And sometimes the government actually does all right. Like under Trump, we actually, we had real job growth. We had a lot of business formation. And so, then like a blind squirrel, they were actually correct. But nowadays under Biden, the media is just doing their best to cover up his screw ups. And, one of the biggest pieces of that has really been the jobs market. Right. There are two things that voters really look at when they're asking whether the economy is doing all right. One of those is inflation. One of those is the jobs numbers. And of course, Joe Biden has screwed up inflation the worst since the 1970s. So they're not going to try to fight on that. So they've really been going with the job market. Now, the thing about the job market is those numbers are so thoroughly cooked. I mean, they are more cooked than even the inflation numbers. So, for starters, when they talk about the unemployment rate, all right, if there's somebody living on the street corner, strung out on fentanyl, bent over, that person is not unemployed. All right, that person is statistically retired. So in order to be unemployed, you've got to be looking for work. So spot the problem, right? You've got millions of people at this point who they're not interested in a job. Why? Because the government gives them benefits, or they've got some other under the table way that they're getting by. Maybe they're living on savings. A lot of people during COVID retired early. It was such a pain being at work. They went ahead and took the early buyouts. So if you look at the labor force numbers, right, the number of Americans who are even in the labor force, that's down 5 million since COVID began. All right, so if you throw those people back in there, because those people do not have jobs, all right, under a normal observer would say they're unemployed. They're still young, but they don't have jobs. So if you throw them back into the numbers, you look at more like 7% for unemployment. All right, so that's step one. Step two, now you go and you look at the actual jobs they have. So if somebody loses a full-time job where they were supporting their family, okay, and then they pick up like DoorDash and Uber, bam, that's plus 2 jobs. You lost one, you gained 2. It's a miracle. Jobs are exploding, right? The quote unquote job numbers, they don't differentiate between part-time jobs and second jobs. So our economy actually last year lost 1.5 million full-time jobs. Those were almost entirely replaced by part-time gigs. All right. Point 3, even if you take the jobs that we gained, over half of those were either government jobs or they were what's called social assistance, which means essentially the ancillary industries that support everything government do. So that's people who take care of migrants, it's people who pass out benefits, Obamacare, Obama phones. So you put those three together, and when you read it in CNN or the New York Times, they're going on, this is the most amazing job market of the century. And then they got an article right after that where they complain how Americans don't see it. American voters are too dumb to understand how good Joe Biden has made it for the. But then you actually sit down with the numbers, it is garbage in there, right? So people can see with their own eyes. They can see, is it easy to get a job, right? Are you actually going to get paid enough to cover your costs if you get a job? That's what people are making the judgment by. That's why people are rejecting Bidenomics, and the mainstream media is doing everything they can to fight that.
Okay, so to that point, and I'm having to use my left hand on the mouse here because my right hand is so swollen and it's in a bucket of ice. If you don't believe me, okay, this is what I'm willing to do to keep the show going. Here they say that inflation is finally getting to the point where it's not sucking away all of Americans' hard-earned pay. Annual wage growth measured 4.1% last month and has been outpacing inflation since May. That's a pleasant turn from the prior 25-month stretch of negative growth. Quote, we had a period in which the pandemic was the story, and we had a period in which prices rose a great deal in a short time, Yellen said. So I think that we need to see a sustained period of low inflation with wages growing more rapidly than inflation for people to feel good about their future
Mhm.
prospects. And then right after that, they write the economic data for 2023 has been pretty good, if not completely odds defying. It's odds defying.
Oh,
It's that
it is
good.
occupying. Yeah, it's bamboozle them with BS, right? So that's a really long way to say that everybody's real wages, in other words, what you actually take home, what your salary can buy, that has gone down since Joe Biden took office. That is pretty close to unprecedented. You got to go back to the 1970s to get that bad. And, again, people can see that, right? Voters, they pick up the newspaper, they get told all these, numbers, and, this is odds defying. The guy got the gift of the century, right? You had all these blue states. Remember, they were keeping the lockdowns going just to get through the election so they could try to kneecap Trump. As soon as the election was over and Joe Biden was installed, at that point, miracle, the pandemic was over. It was astounding. Like, just the rays shot out of Joe Biden's head. California, all these blue states, New York, they suddenly let it rip and everybody was allowed to come back to work. So what do you know? Joe Biden created those jobs. No, they were holding them down to try to sabotage Trump. So whatever odds defying recovery we got was them using the American worker as a human shield to get after Trump. And then beyond that, when you actually go through the numbers, when you add them up since Joe Biden took off, it's been a complete S-storm. It has been the 1970s on steroids. We've had stagflation. We've had record inflation. They've been lying about the inflation. The inflation easily hit double digits last year if you count it how it was counted in the 1970s. If you count it with the miracle math rules that they make up, then it was still pretty rough, right? But if you actually go through the numbers, it is as bad as the 1970s. The other thing is that we just got fresh data the other day on inflation. Inflation is picking up again, right? The whole story this year, Ben, inflation's going away, inflation's all done. Joe Biden did it. First off, whatever progress we saw, that was simply because oil was coming down. Why did oil come down? Because the world digested the Ukraine war, right? When Russia and Ukraine went to war, Russia is one of the biggest oil producers in the world. You had this big spike in oil. And then after that, the entire world economy was slowing down because of what the Fed was doing. That always brings oil down, all right? Because China doesn't export as much, doesn't buy enough oil. At any rate, that was completely external. That was not Joe Biden. You had oil prices going down. That was bringing inflation down. So they've been running on that, just pumping away like, God, it's a miracle what Joe Biden achieved. No, all of that. It was China not buying oil, and it was Ukraine and Russia sorting themselves out. At this point, we've already worked through all of those freebies, and now inflation is starting to go up again. So we just had numbers a couple days ago that inflation is hitting about 4% annualized. It's picking up. Inflation on the last month, that's December, it was actually 3 times higher than it was on November. November was back when Paul Krugman was celebrating how we beat inflation. Guess what? It's back.
Janet Yellen real fast because she's saying that the US economy has struck a soft landing. So I don't even know what that means, but Peter, before I pass out and you take over the show, pay for my emergency room bill by going to AllisonWinePromo.com. I actually probably should have a glass of wine right now so I calm down and then don't worry about my hand anymore because I'm sure it's not helping anything in my histamine reaction to be stressed about a live show, 2 children, and a yellow jacket sitting in my hand. But if you like the show, if you like what you're hearing today, or you just want some wine to celebrate whatever it is that's coming up this year, grandma and you got back together as friends, even though you were unfriended on Facebook because of everything that you were buying into with the mainstream news. And now you guys want to make a truce and have a glass of wine together. This is a great way to do it and support my work at the same time. You get 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping. These are extremist altitude wines. You can't get them anywhere else. They're from Argentina, very remote regions between 6,000 and 9,000 feet, hand harvested grapes, one of the oldest vineyards in the entire country, and one from almost 200 years old. They're just great wines. And again, great way to support my show. So AllisonWinePromo.com. Okay. So Peter, let me go over to CNN real fast. So what is happening here? What does this mean?
Yeah, well, Janet Yellen's going to need some of that wine there.
She might already be drinking too much of someone else's. I
she
don't know.
well, she's been on the shrooms over in China, so
Oh, dang.
yeah, she's going to need a break on
Peter's
that.
not holding back today.
Okay, so the soft landing. All right, the background here is that what the Fed does for a living is create inflation. All right, that's the purpose why you have a Fed. What it, however, unfortunately does is it creates these economic cycles where it creates inflation, and then in order to stop the inflation, it cranks up interest rate. That makes mortgages expensive. That tends to crash the economy. So you get this boom bust. All right. They stomp on the accelerator, pump out the money, then they stomp on the brakes. Everybody goes through the windshield. They do it again and again. That is what the Fed does. It's been doing it for 110 years now. Now, the thing is, every single time they screw up, every single time they run through that boom bust cycle and try to send us into a recession, the media they wax lyrical about this mythical soft landing. See, what's going to happen this time is no, we're not going to go through the windshield because the Fed is going to be so smooth. They're just going to ease on that brake like a maestro, and everybody's just, I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun, really. Every single time it's the same line. You can look for media mentions of soft landing before every single recession. The media goes on and on. This time it's different. I know they haven't pulled it off in 110 years, but what do you know? Jerome Powell, he's got the brains for this. All right. Every single time they go with that myth. So no, a soft landing has never happened. The Fed has never pulled it off in 110 years, dozens of times of trying. It ain't happening. They're not doing it this time. Why do I know they're not doing it this time? Because they just pumped out so much inflation, right? I mean, more than the 1970s. Early COVID, we were running at about twice the pace of money creation as the 1970s. All right, and then they yanked rates up. In other words, they stomped on those brakes. Again, the fastest they've done since the 1970s. There is no way we're having a soft landing. Janet Yellen's job is to lie to everybody how everything's fine. Right. The last time we saw her up there really, doing the rounds, she was up with Jerome Powell back in March. Remember, they were having the joint press conferences, how everything is fine. It's like the what is it? The movies there where the whole town's burning. Nothing to see here, folks. That's what these people do for a living. They are paid to lie. They'll even say it openly. Their job is to manage expectations and to calm fears about the financial. They lie for a living. It is their job. They're proud of it. She is lying. The Fed's going to screw it up. It's done it every single time for 110 years. There are theoretical reasons why they do that. If you understand business cycles, they're going to do it again.
All right, Peter, we are soon going to take some questions from folks over at Locals. If you are not on the editorial board at Locals, what is your excuse? You have no excuse. You should be over there right now because you would be asking Peter the tough questions. You might work for CNN and you've been trying to get him for a long time, and this is your chance. You can actually interview him on my show. AllisonMorrow.locals.com, $5 a month, and you get to go one-on-one with the most censored people on the internet and ask whatever you want to ask. If you want to follow Peter with all this great content you're hearing right now, you can go to his YouTube channel at Prof. St Onge. And he's also on Twitter at Prof. St Onge too. So it makes it rather easy to find him, and you'll get all of that and more. So let me go over to Locals. And while I'm looking at Locals, I also want to just let everybody know that I have a P.O. box. You can send me your pocket lint, a lottery ticket, support if you don't like using your credit card online, a card I would have got in the mail. Oh, hang on a second. Wait, I did get a nice card. Oh yeah, here we go. I got a nice card from somebody and they sent me an InfoWars bumper sticker for my car. So anyway, there you go. So go to P.O. Box 3355 Denellen, Florida 34432. And I would love to get a letter from you.